Welcome to the Thriving Misfits, the podcast where we celebrate resilience, embrace diversity, and challenge norms. I'm your host, Fiona Young, and today we have the honor of speaking with Sudesh, a dear friend of mine who is a seasoned professional with over 20 years of experience across various industries. Sudesh is not just a business and culture change expert, he's a passionate advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Currently, he's leading the DEI global agenda for Asia at Manulife, and Sudesh is committed to creating workplaces where everyone can thrive and contribute, regardless of their background. So join us as we delve into Sudesh's journey. And Sudesh, actually, I just remembered today, we met each other about 6 years ago at a recruitment event where we were invited as panelists. And I was sharing about generations and you were sharing about gender equity, I believe.
God, I didn't even remember that, but yes, we did. So long ago.
Yes, that's right. So before we kick off in terms of how you identify, whether as a misfit, whether as a third culture kid, and also learn from you in terms of how to embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace, let us kick it off with a rapid fire round. So I have 3 questions for you. Number 1, what is the weirdest food you've ever tried while exploring different cultures?
Oh my God, this is hard. It's like everywhere you go, you eat different things. But you know what? It has to be a roasted monitor lizard that I had in some jungle somewhere. This this army guy went in and he came back with this massive thing and he basically said, "We don't have chicken for tonight, we have monitor lizard." I'm like, right. You know what? It actually tastes like chicken.
Don't they always say that though about a lot of things? It always tastes like
It
chicken.
tasted like chicken. So yep, I've had that.
All right. And so, what's the most unique or interesting cultural tradition you've experienced in your travels?
Oh, this is the best. I remember Brazil was in a factory and we went there to go and fix some stuff and went for lunch and I came back and suddenly at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there was an alarm bell that rang across the entire factory. Everyone stopped working and started sleeping. That was the weirdest experience. They slept for 45 minutes. Alarm rang again at 3:45 and they went back to work. And I was just told that it's called the siesta.
Nice. I think that will help you to actually manage your energy levels, right?
I can already imagine that happening in the office at 3 o'clock, an alarm rings and everybody falls asleep. I think we should do that.
All right, last question in terms of the rapid fire round. So, can you share a funny or maybe even an embarrassing cultural misunderstanding you have had while navigating different cultures?
Okay. Not sure about cultural misunderstanding. It was maybe my own ignorance. Attending a Malay wedding, having their food, greeting everyone, and at the end, when you went to go and greet the bride and groom, they are not the bride and groom. Like,
Oops.
it was the wrong wedding. Because
Oh,
there were 3 other weddings happening in the same village. And you just walk in and you're just walking in, and the thing about Malay cultures, they will welcome you. Come on in, not even seeing who you are. And I just walked in and yes,
so you
wrong
were
wedding.
crashing another wedding.
I gate crashed another wedding. I'm proud to say so. I've gate crashed 3 weddings in my life. So yeah.
Oh wow, okay. Right. I guess that's a story for another time.
Exactly.
All right, Sudesh. So, of course, the listeners, the viewers are really interested to know more about your background, your cultural identity. So, can you share a little bit more about your background and your upbringing? How do you identify as? Is it a third culture kid, global citizen, or a misfit?
I don't know, maybe Fiona, I think it's a combination of three. And depending on the time of day, which tree that you pick it. So Malaysian born of Indian origins. And my great grandparents came from India thanks to the British. And the British brought everybody, right? They went around the world, they picked up every Indian and Chinese they can think, and they dropped them around like seeds in a pod. And so we grew up from that background from the late 1800s. And interestingly enough, the Indians who first came to Malaysia were, were actually kind of slaves.
Mm.
And they were working in the mines and in the rubber estates and construction. with no salary. Sometimes it's just a meal a day and kind of a stuff. So you grow up from that background and upbringing. And fast forward 100 years, 100 more years, when I was born, that kind of stuck with you. People keep reminding you of your past, so a past that you were not used to, and you don't even know that past. I was born in Penang, and it was a beautiful island in Penang, grew up in KL,
Mm.
but people kept reminding you of your past. And they remind you of your past by the way you look, the way you speak, the things that you do, and the perceptions that certain communities behave certain ways. So I'm not sure whether would you call that like a culture kid or a misfit or even a what I can't even tell what I was because
Right.
it always feels like you don't belong
Mm.
and people refer you. And the only way to get out of it is you laugh it off. You know, in school when friends make fun of you, you laugh it off because at that time the knowledge of DEI wasn't there. So there was no way of protecting yourself and all these words like psychological safety, all that didn't exist.
Mm.
So the only way to keep yourself safe was to laugh it off. And that's how it was growing up and in school and studying and up to college. And you think that things will change when you work. Not really.
Mm.
It did get a bit better when you matured. But then when I moved to Hong Kong in 2007, somehow kind of followed you along.
Yeah.
And we also had similar challenges in Hong Kong of different kinds. And quickly realized people are not being discriminatory just because they want to. It was stemming from ignorance,
Mm.
the lack of understanding, and the lack of awareness of you. So it is a very subtle form of bullying. And why do bullies bully? Bullies bully because they don't know something that you know. So if you shift that into an education moment, you
Mm.
educate the bully or you educate the person, sh they shouldn't do that to you anymore. So I kind of shifted my entire career now on the path of education.
Yeah, I
And
mean, that's amazing because I remember when we first met at that event, right? And you were still working in another organization, you were in a completely different role. I myself also came from a completely different environment in oil and gas, and we're both now here really trying to advocate, trying to champion that, trying to create that sense of belonging, not I guess only in the workplace, but also in personal aspects, right? So it's fantastic to see your journey. It's really inspiring. And when you mentioned about bullying, I think these days we also encounter a lot of microaggressions where it's not really in your face, but it's kind of implied, right? Have you encountered something like that?
no, all the time. I mean, I'm sure Fiona, you go through the same as well. I mean, assuming that you're the only woman in the room,
Yes.
and have there been situations where suddenly you are asked to bring coffee
Oh,
or or
or
asked to
during the
take notes?
minutes of the meeting. Yes,
Yes.
that's right.
Maybe because you have good writing and that is why you take notes or what. But that happens all the time.
Mm.
And being a person of different backgrounds in the room, often you can be the quiet one because the one who speak the most in the room are the majority. And the minorities always take a step back and just watch what is going on. And that is just for people of different cultures and different genders. Can you imagine if you're having a disability?
Oh,
How
yeah.
does that feel?
Mm.
Suddenly the whole thing changes completely. So it is not easy. The microaggressions can be a subtle hand gesture. It can
Mm.
be a spoken word. It can be the way that you are looked at, or even it can be said in jest and people laugh about it. Oh, I'm not being serious. It's just joking.
Yeah,
But that alone is enough to make you feel bad.
absolutely.
So I think this is something that happens all the time, every day to all of you. Everyone who's watching this would have experienced one form of microaggression every single day.
Yeah.
So the only way that we can shift that narrative is to educate, to create that awareness, to be that upstander, not only for yourself, but
Mhm.
for others that you see is experiencing the same. Don't be the quiet one watching it like we are watching videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
Take action. Then only you can see change happen.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I love that. You have to be the change that you want to see, right? All right. So now that we understand a little bit more about your background, where you come from, you are playing such an important role in the space of DI in the workplace, in organizations, in the corporate world. So, as a DEI thought leader and advocate, could you share some successful strategies or maybe some programs that you've implemented to really create a much more inclusive work environment, especially at Manulife?
It's a great question. I mean, there's often seen that DI is sometimes seen as a tick in the box exercise, that you do it because corporate told you to do so.
Mm.
Somebody in North America who is the head, where the HQ is, these are the five things that you need to go and do it. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, because we are doing it because it's an activity or a strategy. But why are you doing this for? For who is it for? And I often tell people, and I give leadership training as well, be the leader that you want your leader to be. If you have a certain expectations of your leader, of your boss, you want your boss to be or treat you a certain way, you be that leader that you want your boss to be to
Mm.
your subordinates. There's no two games to it. So if you want to make that change and you want to be in an inclusive space, be that agent of change for others, like what you just said, be the change that you want to be. So I think it started from there in the sense that workplace in terms of talent. So Manulife, I'm proud to be working for an organization that's very open and inclusive in this space. So we have been doing a number of things across the various minorities across the region and globally as well. And we come to a point where now we are taking the DEI narrative beyond just the workplace to now customers. So how do we bring DEI to customers who are buying your products? Are we selling to a wider audience, or are we just selling to the same people over and over again? Whereas we have a lot of other communities who are not insured, who are not protected, just because of a perception that they can't afford, is it?
Mm.
Or a perception of something that has kind of blindsided a lot of insurers and bankers. So it's nice to see how we're taking DI further. Some notable examples we kind of started doing, especially with you. So we started a program identifying talent from young. So when we start doing pipeline, talent leadership pipeline, have you noticed the situations where it's the same people who are filling the gaps, who look the same, talk the same, be the same? And you will find a subordinate or a successor who looks like you, talks like you, because you think this is successful. So your successor has to be like this.
Affinity bias, right?
And this happens in many organizations. Well, it works. It works because you think that you have created a great brand. But if you go beyond, then there are many other talents in the company that is often overlooked. So we created a very specific program called Inspire, where we identify talent from minority backgrounds. And these are hidden talents, not really high potentials, but hidden talents across the organization at a very junior level. We pair them up with a sponsor who will take care of them in the coming period, where we give offering coaching and training and mentoring support. And they are supposed to handhold them until they achieve three things: a promotion, a lateral move, or a mobility move across the markets. Having a sponsor is highly important. And for a minority individual, it's a rare opportunity to have a sponsor who can talk on their behalf, an ally, as you say. So that program, super successful, ran across the market. Another one that is kind of dear and close to me is the Diversity Champion Internship Program, which now we are calling Diversity Immersion Program. It was just three companies 4 years ago over coffee. We were lamenting about how unfair the world is. Hyatt Hotels, ourselves, and Herbert Smith Freehills, just
Mm.
lamenting and complaining. All these students from universities who will graduate, they will end up getting all these top-paying jobs from the big banks and the big insurers and the big companies. And what happens to all these students who are from tier 2, tier 3 universities or from minority universities? They will never get a job. So we were just lamenting. And then we're like, hang on a minute. Rather than complaining about it, can we do something about it? They're like, cool, what do you suggest? What if we offer a very unique internship immersion program It is offered to very specific students who come from these categories: minority backgrounds, gender, disability, race, and come from tier 2, tier 3 vocational universities in Hong Kong, and give them first-hand opportunity to spend 1 week in Hyatt, 1 week in Herbert Smith, 1 week in Manulife. Can you imagine the opportunity where you get to work in an insurance company, a law firm, and a hotel chain in a month, meeting all the senior leaders and being involved in every department at one go? Amazing program, never been done before, and we launched it 4 years ago.
Wow.
Now it's the fourth year. We have
Amazing.
expanded to Singapore the second year now, and we're
Wow.
launching Indonesia and Japan this year. So great program. Same three companies are spreading the wings across the region and trying to shift the narrative that talent
Yeah.
can come from everywhere.
That's great. And especially having that synergy also with different industries, right? Being able to also learn from each other, leveraging on each other's networks and resources. That's great. Such a great initiative that you've put together with the partnering companies. And now it's the fourth year and expanding. So when do we see that expanding worldwide? Are we seeing that?
Hopefully, the aim is actually over the next couple of years, when we get more markets involved, we are hoping to actually fly all these talents between the markets. So assuming that when you apply, if you get selected, you can choose which country you want to spend the month in. And the company sponsors you to travel. And some of these kids, again, don't even have a passport.
Yeah,
So I think these are the kind of opportunities that minority talents lack. They
that's
don't feel it, they don't see it, because their parents were not there.
yeah,
When I was growing up, I didn't have those experiences either. I only knew what my parents were doing. Nobody gave us those opportunities. So what if corporates like us or leaders like us offer these opportunities to some of these talents? You will see the creativity flourish. From this 4 years on, some of the former alumni has already joined one of these three companies. Now we've got new talent that we have groomed from early days. They are now one of the most highly sought after talent in these companies. They are super creative. The retention is high, and people want more.
fantastic. That's an amazing story. Now, I know working with Manulife, you are setting the bar really high in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, not only because now, of course, you're heading this all, but now if you had a chance to speak to another organization who are just kicking off this journey, what kind of advice would you give to them in terms of helping them also to prioritize and elevate their DEI efforts?
No, I often have conversations like this with many organizations who are starting up or doing this from scratch. We meet them regularly to coach and share. And I often say the same thing: do it because you want to and not because you have to. If you're doing it because you have to meet certain ESG criteria, or you have to do it because your boss told you so, don't do it. Because your colleagues and your employees are quite smart, they can see through your teeth that it is not real. Then you will lose that effort. Do it because you feel this is important. It is great for your brand. It is great for your company. And honestly, it is not difficult, and it doesn't cost much. The moment you do it with your heart, really willingly wanting to do it, things will just flow into place. It is not about organizing panels and events and cupcake sessions. It's not about that.
Yeah.
It is about how are you adopting your policies to be more inclusive, from your benefits, from your opportunities, from your narrative and your messaging. Because employees can feel it. When employees sense it, your customers who are attached to your employees will also sense it. Your brand value increases. Eventually, your brand becomes a more sought after brand for purchase, especially if you are selling a good or services that is of good nature.
Yeah.
You will never buy a brand that is doing bad today. Okay, if one of the brands that you're so used to suddenly does something bad for the environment or society, the very next day you will stop buying it.
Totally.
So think about brand building.
Yeah.
Do good because you want to do it, not because you have to do it. That's the big advice I give.
And I think it's also really about authenticity, right? Like if you really want to do it and it becomes like DEI becomes part of your DNA, people will sense it. People will feel much more emotionally connected to your brand, right? So I really love this sharing, Sudesh. Now, moving back to a little bit more of a conversation around our personal background. We have, of course, a lot of listeners who feel like a misfit, right? So that's the reason why they tuned in into our podcast and they want to learn how to thrive as a misfit. So what kind of advice would you give to someone who may be struggling with their identity, or maybe they feel like a misfit in society?
You know what? You're not alone. There are so many misfits of such around. I mean, and you can be also a misfit from a majority community too.
Hmm.
We are all different in our own ways. You may look like another person. So you say you come from a majority community, you look like another person, but because you are kind of lumped in a majority community, sometimes you're also not seen. So you're also unique in your own way. So do not be afraid of your uniqueness. Very simple advice is be an advocate for yourself and others. Do not be an activist.
Hmm.
So there's a difference, activism and advocacy.
Yeah.
Activism gets you far, gets you quick, gets you heard, but you're often forgotten quickly. Advocacy is a slow process, that education, awareness, you keep doing it, you keep teaching others. It takes a while, but it sticks. Advocacy sticks. People remember. It is a slow process. But the
Right.
moment you hit it and people know you and it exists, it will last for a long time. So be an advocate for yourself and be an advocate for others. Do not be afraid
Mm-hmm.
because fear would hold you back.
And remember, we're not alone, right? I think that's such a really important thing to remember, that we're not alone feeling that way. And it can be in the workplace, it can be in school, right? It can be anywhere. And I think it's really about embracing our uniqueness, as you already said rightly. So, final question, because this is a question that I constantly get as a third culture kid. So, I was born in Malaysia, same to you. Then I traveled, or I moved to Germany at the age of 3, lived there for about 25 years, had a bit of a stint in the US, in the UK, and then in 2010 moved to Hong Kong. Now I'm back in my country of birth in Malaysia. So I constantly get this question, and I wanted to ask this to you as well as the guest. So where do you call home?
Um, and home is for me simple. Home is where my heart is, and home is where my family is. So I'm extremely attached to my family, my wife, my 2 kids. I go where they go, kind of a thing. And for them, they have chosen they want to be back in Malaysia one day. Hence, they have to go back in Malaysia one day. Being born in Malaysia, you can be born in any country, okay, whatever. You often have that resentment of lack of opportunity or lack of something in that country, and you start moving to different countries.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, you will end up where you began, because the grass is not often greener on the other side. People like you and I, we have traveled, we have seen different things, but somehow or rather, home is where you came from, and you want to go back there because you feel now you have gained all this knowledge. Let me go back and change how that original country is.
Yeah.
So I think I'll end up back in Malaysia for sure.
Fantastic. Be my neighbor again. All
Yeah.
right. So, thank you so much, Sudesh, for spending this time with us, sharing your insights, sharing your personal stories and experiences. I think it's really great that you are also being able to be vulnerable and share all of these things, because ultimately, as you said, we have to remember we're not alone. So, thank you so much to the listeners, to the viewers for tuning in today's podcast of The Thriving Misfits. We hope you found Sudesh's insights and as inspiring as I did. And remember, embracing diversity and inclusion isn't just a corporate agenda, it's a societal imperative. And if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and share with your network. So together, let's continue celebrating resilience and empowering misfits everywhere. Until the next time, stay curious, stay open-minded, and keep on thriving.